bastard, Hans.
Rape it, Murphy, you son of a bitch.
This is Dueling Pistols, where history draws first and legends never die. No fluff, no filters, just raw stories of grit, blood, and legacy. Triggered by Black Flag. But Henderson wanted to give the capital of his colony a name to suggest civilization and stability, not war and danger, and he changed the name from Fort Boone to Boonesborough.
I gotta find out what a borough is. That's gonna bother me. I hear it all the time.
Yeah, isn't it the Hobbit Burrow or something like that?
Hobbits live in burrows, but the opening line is, once upon a time, that there was a hobbit who lived in a hole in the ground.
Well, yeah. All right, welcome back to the show. I am your host, Brian Call. I'm joined by my brother, Brent Call. How are you, Brent?
Well, thank you.
All right, let's get back into the story where we left off. Daniel Boone is now, where is he? He just finished chopping a trail into Kentucky. Boone's Trace. And now he is he's out there, and he's a little bit worried as a few of his folks have been getting killed by Indians. Mm-hmm. They've just sort of got to where they're going to start to build a fort and hang out and establish a settlement and all that kind of stuff. And he wrote a letter saying, hey, somebody better get out here and join us because it's pretty dangerous with just this small group of us settlers getting out here, his axemen and him. So here he is, and he's a little worried, and he sent that letter in. And Richard Henderson is the judge, politician. He's greased all the palms, talked to all the right people. He's the one that commissioned Boone to go in there and establish this place. He's kind of a brilliant, ambitious guy. Remember, he basically bought Kentucky or the area from the Cherokee, right? And Dragging Canoe is not happy about it, who's a Kukatukaluluka son, something like that.
And a Takaluka. Come on.
So that guy's son is not happy. And it's been about, since they bought it, it's been, I think, just under a year, and things are getting dicey. Okay. So now the settlers, Henderson, he's still back in Virginia, and he is thinking that there's a somewhat of a peace made with the Indians. And so, no attacks. He bought it, right? Mm-hmm. Even though everyone kind of acknowledged it's a bit of a farce, they still
Indians
thought it
included.
They thought it bought him a little time. Mm-hmm. It didn't really. So some of the settlers were surprised too. They're like, but wait, we bought it. And in hindsight, the book does mention that it's kind of hard for us to fathom the idea that they didn't see this coming, but some did, some didn't. It's no different than the world is today, where there are survivors and there are not survivors. Mm-hmm. There are the paranoid and the not paranoid. There are the alert and the asleep. The awoke, the awakened. I don't want to use the word woke. That doesn't work anymore. Based. There's the based, and then there's the...
I don't know if that works much better.
So here we go. We have Kentucky was the key, okay? The book goes, it is easy to forget in the 21st century, the significance for the English-speaking eastern communities of the settling and holding of Kentucky. So Kentucky was a big deal, and it's easy for us to think today, like, oh, what a small thing, but the book's going to lay it out. The bluegrass region was valuable in itself, almost beyond description, as a place to claim and build farms, towns, and future cities and great wealth. Explorers and speculators and leaders of the time understood that a foothold in Kentucky served as a buffer against the Indians, against the British to the north, and perhaps the Spanish to the west and to the south. But even more than that, a settled Kentucky promised to open the whole Ohio Valley to settlement. Some Indians seemed to grasp this great implicity and fought with tenacity, courage, and imagination the effort, the forts and stations, farmers and surveyors in the great meadow. They seemed to perceive from the first that once their buffalo hunting grounds in the bluegrass were claimed and cleared, the land north of the Ohio would be next. Other native leaders, such as Cornstalk and the Shawnees, were willing at first to accommodate the English settlers and did not foresee an inexorable tidal wave of westward expansion. For the whites, nothing could have been more exhilarating, more intoxicating than the taking and keeping of land across the barrier of the mountains. For once, the hurdle was finally surpassed. After 150 years of hesitating and yearning in the east, the great river valleys of the central continent would be within reach. Filson described Kentucky as the best tract of land in North America and probably in the world. The Ohio Valley was more beautiful and contained more land than anyone had mapped or measured. And beyond lay the Illinois country, the fertile Mississippi Valley stretching almost to Canada in the north and to New Orleans in the south. And beyond the Mississippi, reports were heard of an even bigger river valley, the Missouri, that reached far into a mythical west and whispered rumors of mountains so high their tips sparkled with snow in July. Talk about like a pretty romantic period to be alive, right? Like, man, I mean, look at the country they're in. Look at the mountains. Look at the unknown, I should say. Mm-hmm. What's around the next corner. But whatever lay beyond, in the sunlit pastures and hills of coming years, Kentucky was the key, the first west. Kentucky was the threshold, the beachhead, to who knew what playlands and empires of the future farther west. Henderson was a bit surprised that the Indians didn't follow his treaty, his purchase. And he decides that he's got to rush to Boone. He's got to get his people together and he's got to hustle out there. Now that they have a Boone's Trace, they got a trail, the Transylvania Way, road trail, whatever. He's like, okay, we got to grab our people and go. So he does it. He goes. As they inched along the trace Boone had made, Henderson was surprised to meet more and more men fleeing from Kentucky. Most were not from Boone's company of axemen, but from scattered hunting and surveying parties. By then, Kentucky was full of small groups of men hoping to stake a claim in the wilderness, most of them squatters. News of the Indian attacks on Boone's group sent the weak-hearted hurrying back toward North Carolina and Virginia, or up the Ohio River toward Fort Pitt. News traveled fast among the Indians also. The traders living among the Indians. Henderson's greatest fear was that Boone would abandon the post on the river and return with his men before Henderson's large group arrived to reinforce the station. He knew that everything depended on Boone's leadership, character, resourcefulness. If Boone failed, the whole Transylvania Company would fail. It was beyond a doubt, Henderson wrote later, that our right, in effect, depended on Boone's maintaining his ground.
So when he's calling for backup, they're like, gotcha, bro.
He's afraid that Boone's going to bail out like everybody else did.
Little does he know. That's what he likes. He likes hanging out in dangerous neck of the woods.
But the larger party was moving so slowly and perhaps reluctantly that Henderson decided someone should ride ahead and assure Boone that reinforcements were on the way. The only man willing to make such a journey was Captain William Coke, who had served in the military during Lord Dunmore's war. Coke said he would go if someone else would ride with him. But there were no takers, even for an inducement of 10,000 acres of Kentucky land. Henderson was desperate, and finally Coke agreed to go alone. I don't know if it's Coke or Cock, but I'm going to go with Coke.
I'd rather say Coke 30 times in the podcast.
Yep, me too. Provided with weapons and supplies, he set off on April 10 and arrived at Boone's camp on April 14, so 4 days of travel, to find that there had been another attack on April 4th, and one more man had been killed. Boone chose Michael Stoner to return to Cumberland Gap and lead Henderson and his party into Kentucky. Henderson's relief was considerable. He embraced Coke and promised him yet another 5,000 acres for his solitary ride across the mountains. So they got in, and Henderson's like, oh, thank goodness. But it was Boone to whom he felt the greatest gratitude. It was owing to Boone's confidence in us and the people's in him that a stand was ever attempted in order to wait for our coming, Henderson wrote later in his account. However, he did not offer to give Boone any additional land, more than the 2,000 acres he had promised at the beginning. Only his panic on the trail and his exhilaration at arriving at Boonesborough explain Henderson's generous gift to Coke. Henderson. What are your thoughts on Henderson?
He just sounds like some kind of a slimy British turd, to be honest. Like the fact that he's surprised about the Indians and stuff like that. I have a hard time seeing him not seeing that going belly up. It feels like he's just kind of trying to cover his butt. Like, what are you talking? I paid the Indians. We bought this.
I think they had more time. They had less. I don't think no one trusts the Indians, just like the Indians don't trust the white people, or not. Just like nobody trusts anybody in this time. It's survival of the fittest.
It does kind of seem to be everybody out for themselves
to a degree. I mean, and your family and your people, whoever.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Your people. There just happens to be 50 people in the valley.
Right.
You know what I mean? You have like 40 different kinds of natives, and then you have 10 to 15 other different kinds of people there. They said they had Spanish there, the Europeans, and then they're surrounded by a bunch of Indians in this valley.
Irish, Scottish, so
on.
The book says Henderson was a fascinating man of considerable means, education, ambition, and vision. Now, it also says some other things about Henderson we're about to get into.
Okay.
Other people do as well. An English friend wrote of Henderson, even in the superior courts where oratory and eloquence are as brilliant and powerful as in Westminster, he soon became distinguished and eminent, and his superior genius shone forth with great splendor and universal applause. While others might see Henderson as greedy, law-defying, a little mad, Boone viewed his employer as the good angel who had finally enabled him to settle in Kentucky. But Richard Henderson was a lawyer and businessman, dependent on men like Boone in the wilderness. In choosing Daniel Boone, in spite of his debts and credit history, Henderson proved an excellent judge of character. Without Boone, his venture would have been a disaster from the start. Its later collapse would be beyond both his and Boone's control and would have nothing to do with anyone's skill in the wilderness. A little foreshadowing, Brent. Did you know it collapses, this whole endeavor?
No, I would not have guessed that, because guess what? There's a place called Kentucky.
The story of Boonesborough is a wonderful combination of legend, heroism, failure, and farce. The site was originally dubbed Fort Boone by the roadmakers in honor of their foreman, but Henderson wanted to give the capital of his colony a name to suggest civilization and stability, not war and danger, and he changed the name from Fort Boone to Boonesborough.
I got to find out what a borough is. That's going to bother me. I hear it all the time.
Yeah, isn't it the Hobbit Burrow or something like that?
Hobbits live in burrows, but the opening line is once upon a time that there was a hobbit who lived in a hole in the ground.
Well, yeah.
A hole or tunnel dug by a small animal, especially a rabbit, as a dwelling.
Yeah, but what's burrow in terms of village? Type in like burrow/village and see what it says. The first scattered cabins were in a hollow close to the river, but Henderson chose to place his stockade on the gently sloping meadow above the river. The hollow was filled with sycamores and contained the two springs, one fresh and bold, the other sluggish and salty. A spring at Boonesborough constantly emits sulfurous particles, and near the same place is a salt spring, John Filson would later write. Animals had gathered to lick the salty ground there for thousands of years, and Indians had lived there also. Historians have pointed out that the site of Sycamore Hollow resembled in many ways the treaty signing grounds at Sycamore Shoals. So it goes into kind of what the place was starting to look like. But the fact is, nobody wanted to build a fort. You'd think...
First thing first. Are you kidding me?
However, when we're going to get into this, there's, a complacency that I think all human beings suffer from, where they think, oh, it won't happen to me. It's kind of a human condition. I forget what they call it, but
do you know who Bert Kreischer is? He's a stand-up comedian, good friends with Joe Rogan, and he has a podcast with Louis C.K.
Yeah.
And he's telling Louis about all these experiences he had where people around him, don't make it and they die. And that brought him to the realization that he's never going to die. Like that's obviously what that means. And Louis is just looking at him like, is this guy for real?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of weird. It says, in retrospect, it seems difficult to explain such a lack of cooperation and sense of common purpose, because nobody wants to build this thing. They have all these other things they need to get done, and the book will get into that in just a second. Before we dive into this, let me just read. It says, it became clear to Henderson that many of his would-be settlers were rolling stones, Brent. Debtors, loafers, men eager for adventure and disposed to avoid work.
Sounds like my people.
In a letter of June 12, 1775, Henderson wrote to a partner in North Carolina, quote, to give you a small specimen of the disposition of the people, it may be sufficient to assure you that when we arrived at this place, we found Captain Boone's men as inattentive on the score of fear to all appearances as if they had been in Hillsborough. A small fort only wanted 2 or 3 days' work to make it tolerably safe, was totally neglected on Mr. Coke's arrival, and unto this day remains unfinished, notwithstanding the repeated applications of Captain Boone and every representation of danger from ourselves. Henderson went on to explain that the men worked in the fields scattered for 2 miles along the river and didn't even bother to take their guns with them.
That's ballsy.
About 30 men out of the original 80 had returned to the settlements over the mountains. The men who stayed seemed desperate to clear their own fields and put in crops. Without a crop, they would not be able to stay the next winter, and they would lose their claim on the land. No doubt the necessity of clearing a patch and planting corn was part of the explanation for the reluctance to build the fort. And many of the men may have been exhausted from the heavy work of chopping their way through the mountains, clearing land, building cabins, plowing the root-laced soil. I mean, it's not like they didn't work hard to get there.
For sure.
But here they are, and they're focused on their crops. But as far as a place of safety, I mean, they didn't even take their guns with them when they went out and did this stuff. It seems,
No, bro. George Washington said, stay strapped or get clapped. And I'm all about that. I ain't, Heck no.
In our time, it's hard to comprehend the settlers' rage to clear land. While we now tend to see trees as friends and forests as welcoming shade, those on the frontier more often viewed trees as enemies and forests as a refuge for Indians and panthers and wolves. It was one's duty to fell the threatening trees and tear away the brush and let the sunlight of calm and reason into the swamps and the hollows. Land was there to be surveyed, brought under the axe and plow. With wilderness stretching west hundreds of miles to the Mississippi and danger lurking in thickets and canebrakes, their only hope was to clear a space for cultivation and safety. It was the dream of settlers to have green pastures and orchards of apple and peach trees. The ground had to be divided in straight lines, the crops planted in straight lines, making sense of sprawling terrain. Sinkholes had to be filled in and springs deepened. The forest had to be driven back to acceptable boundaries. A settler went too far, not only with the Indians and the British, but with briar and mighty oak tree.
You know, I didn't hear Henderson say nothing about digging no ditches himself or moving any logs.
Well, we'll get into that. There's this idea that they go to war against nature to tame it and bring it under
rage.
It says brambles and vines ran rampant, seedlings took root, and sumac shot up 10 feet in 2 months. With scythe and axe, the settler did battle all summer against the army of weeds that threatened to surround and drown him. The wild growth in the hot southern sun had to be corrected and instructed, but where a forest had been cleared up and sorted out and farmed for 4 or 5 years, the topsoil washed away if the ground was slightly tilted. Gully-washing rains and frog-strangling storms swept away the black forest mold and left clay grooved and smocked as though by giant fingers. With all the topsoil gone, the dirt no longer fit or fertile, the land was called an old field, good only for schoolyard and churchyard or graveyard. The settlers had no choice but to go farther into the woods to slay more trees and rip out roots and rocks and slice open the soil for the next new field.
The words he's using to describe this, I love it.
Yeah, I mean,
it's descriptive. Like, it sounds like they're going to war with the forest, and they're in a hurry.
They are. Anybody who has, we grew up in Oregon, in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. We beat back the forest, and it came back and beat it back and beat it. And it was a yearly thing. It was, and this is with modern tech. This is with poisons and
salting the earth. It's ridiculous, torches. Man. It's funny because I came down here and I tried to explain to people, like, they're like, people would ask me, do you like to garden? I was like, oh, I love gardening. Mm-hmm. Then I moved here. It's not the same. I'm used to throwing seeds on the ground and walking away and coming back in a couple months.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's not even close. Soil means so much.
In Oregon, you got to fight back the weeds. Mm-hmm. Here, you got to,
So I found burrow. And kind of how you think about it, it describes the size of the place almost. So you have like a city, you have a town, you have a village, and then you have a borough.
Okay.
But it also has to have, it has to be legal, like it has to have like a charter attached to it or something like that from the crown. But
Got it. So it's sort of the first beginnings of a town.
You ever cooked with sumac before?
No.
So sumac folk, for those that are watching, you'll see this plant all over on the side of the road here in Utah and other places. You use it for dyeing. It's bright red. It's super. Everyone has probably seen this plant before.
Yeah.
But it's also used in cooking.
Okay.
It has a very mellow, flowery sweetness to it. You don't have to. It's kind of naturally sweet.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've seen when I was on my mission in Vegas, there were people that would put it in like lemonade and stuff.
Yeah, they were doing their thing, living off the land. They had to beat it back. They had to race. They had to get their crops in. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to stay. They'd leave. Someone would come along and take their land away. You have to like plant and live there to own it.
So they have all these things that they have to do to be able to keep the land
by law.
But then Henderson's like, let's build a fort, y'all.
Yeah, but I mean, if you die, then it doesn't matter if you planted a crop.
True.
And so
these guys, though, they're all about rolling the dice. Like, they wouldn't be here if they weren't doing that.
Well, it says to build a serious fort the size Richard Henderson had planned required enormous effort. The palisades of heavy logs had to be sawed or chopped, dragged out of the woods, and set in the ground. The fence alone, as Henderson had planned it, would require close to 1,000 logs. Each log had to be cut and trimmed and pulled to the building's side. To the site. By June, the weather was getting hot, and there were flies and mosquitoes to worry about, as well as hornets and wasps.
They have to drop, fell, and drag 1,000 trees and then build a place.
No just for the wall. To set the logs upright as pickets, a ditch had to be dug, sometimes 3 or even 4 feet deep. With only picks and shovels, the ditch was made through rocks and fat roots and packed clay. So you got to erect these logs in the earth. Where you're going to bury them, right?
I watched someone build a log cabin last night with just an axe after we talked about it on the podcast the other day.
I told all those YouTube videos.
I fell asleep to it totally, but it was impressive how fast he put something up. But the cool part to me was when he was going along the trees and like cutting out moss to lay down and then coming off with mud afterwards and stuff. Yeah.
Well, where our parents bought all that land with the family in Oregon City, and it was just a forest, 40 acres of forest, and they carved in roads with modern, tractors.
And there's a difference between forests nowadays and like an old growth forest.
Yeah,
like you're talking about like a different. It's like an old buck and a young buck. Like they're the same species technically.
I recall. I mean, I remember being a little kid and just dirt getting pushed by dozers and excavators come out. We didn't have excavators at that time when I was a kid. They didn't really make them.
You said grandpa and some dynamite?
It was dynamite. And they blew up the trees and the stumps. And I can remember they get the dynamite in there, and then we'd all get under one of the dump trucks, and we'd all cover our ears and like, okay, get ready. And then boom, and then it would rain dirt above, and then we'd go out and they'd shovel some more. They'd locate all the kids, get us under the truck, blow up another one, and then they would doze around. And this is with modern, but it was still a ton of work. I mean, we were carving out a home in the wilderness, in the forest, and there were streams and ponds and sinkholes and the whole thing. So this is doing that kind of work with primitive tools. I don't think modern day folks that haven't really done that kind of thing before have an idea of what it is that they're up against and how hard
one of the earlier
is.
podcasts, it talked about him draining a swamp. And I was like, homie did it by hand with probably a stick. Like that's insane.
So it says once the big logs would be set in those giant holes they dug after they chopped out the roots and the rock and whatever's in the way has to come out. Once they were set, large and down, the dirt was heaped around them and then tamped in firm. When the logs were pegged together, the wall was even stronger. It would be difficult to imagine harder labor in the summer heat. No wonder the men preferred to be working off in their fields or hunting. And once the fence and gates of the enclosure were in place, the work was only started. To function as a fortress, the structure had to have those 2-story blockhouses at each corner, the second story jutting out over the first and over the palisade. Without the raised blockhouses, those inside could not see out except through cracks between the logs.
No thanks. I've seen how that works out.
Yeah, then they burn it down.
Called murder holes, bro.
and ideally, the fort would have a walkway behind the length of the wall where riflemen could stand or kneel and shoot at attackers from up above on top of the wall. Henderson took up his quarters in the blockhouse erected at this time. It formed an angle of defense, the angle nearest the river. The historian George Rank tells us, to withstand attacks of more than a few hours, the fort had to have a well and a storehouse of provisions. There had to be a powder magazine and tools for repairing guns and making bullets. There had to be fireplaces and pens up for livestock. Any horses or cattle left outside the Indians would steal or kill. One visitor to Boonesborough in 1775 wrote, quote, "It was all anarchy and confusion, and you could not discover what person commanded, for in fact no person did command entirely." Henderson thought only another attack could wake the men up to follow his commands and complete the defenses. The Boonesborough fort would remain unfinished until 1778.
Jeez, they dragged their feet on that.
So, because what year are we right now? This is 1775, right? Yeah.
That's what he said in a letter in 1775.
So there's some diaries at this time, and it shows that Henderson was an eloquent man, but he wasn't built for frontier living, Brent.
Oh. Did his powder come off his wig and get in his eyeball?
He saw himself and his partners as the Lord's proprietor of a thriving colony growing ever richer and more powerful. Mm-hmm. He had brought with him a library of 48 expensive volumes, books.
Homie just dragged a bunch of books with him out into the woods.
Yep, the reality of life.
Some powder, bro.
The reality of life in the wilderness appalled him. His immigrants included men who had left the settlements to escape authority and order, often to escape the law itself. While Henderson reported a world that seemed to be falling apart, Boone, who was used to frontier conditions, and the men who went there appeared to be satisfied with their progress. Boone was all good, and
this is great.
Henderson was having a meltdown.
Boone's also okay with living in a hole in the ground. Sounds like my kind of guy.
So it says they were trying to get their food sorted out and all that kind of stuff. You know, what kind of potatoes, squash, beans, all that. And it says that they were tormented with ticks, Brent, a small animal like a sheep blouse, but very tough skin. They get on you by walking in the woods. This is a quote. And if you don't take care to pick them off in time, they work their heads through the skin, and then you pull the body away, but the head will remain in the skin, which is very disagreeable.
Man, you remember the first time you heard about ticks?
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I heard about a tick, and they're like, and you got to be careful because Lyme disease. And then freaking one of my people I look up to, Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
You know, he got Lyme disease and went through a crazy spell for 2 years trying to fix it. And I'm just like, whew.
Yeah.
No,
they're creepy.
They're
like
super
alien
creepy.
like.
They really are. Not only that, but
I'm
if you
so
look
used
at
to them now. I don't even care. They don't faze me. But I've still yet to have one burrow in.
Yeah, consider me phased.
And
no.
So back to the book, it says, since there was no meeting house, so what they do, Brent, is they all gather around and they decide to create some laws. Okay.
That's always a good thing.
Some laws as they're building a city and they're going to dial it in. And Henderson opened the convention. They're all gathered under this giant elm, which they call the Divine Elm.
The Divine Elm. Is it just that cool of an elm?
That magnificent tree, the sole cathedral in a wilderness as vast, as solitary as the illimitable ocean. So yeah, big tree. It's something like 100 feet of shade or something. It says, Henderson, as he presided over the opening of the convention under the great elm tree that spread its shade more than 100 feet wide.
100 feet wide?
Yep, and he outlined the kind of laws he thought should be passed for safety and to protect property.
Okay. I'm kind of on board with that one so far.
He said, stressing the importance of courts and justice, countering charges made by royal officials that his colony would be a refuge for debtors and other persons of desperate circumstance. He outlined the necessity of organizing a militia and suggested laws against the wanton destruction of game animals.
Okay. Henderson going up, moving on up.
Clearly, the scarcity of the game around the settlement was already recognized as a serious concern. Only 7 weeks after Boone and his men had arrived, Henderson also promised that in the new colony there would be complete religious freedom. Okay, so they're setting up these boundaries as a group, right? And because his enterprise later failed, and because of the grandiosity of his schemes, Henderson has had few defenders over the years. After his name was tainted with defeat, few could find virtue in his methods or his ambitions. But his statement about power originating with the people has a surprisingly modern ring. He was speaking in a world of monarchy and colonial governments. His language is that of a lawyer of the time. He intended to impress his listeners with the authority over the English language, as he had done in court many times, but whatever his talents and accomplishments, they were doomed to be seen in the context of his failure. I think the book gives him more of a fair shake.
Yeah,
nowadays.
I was going to say, he sounds... I'm not hating him so much as I was 5 minutes ago.
I mean, in so many ways, he was doing what he could. You need honestly, you need the Hendersons and you need the Boones, right? To make, Boone brought to the table what Henderson didn't have.
And Henderson was able to fuel Boone financially.
Yeah, Henderson brought what Boone didn't have, right? So that they could both accomplish a goal of settling in Kentucky.
Henderson brought books.
Henderson brought all the right connections.
Okay.
Because it goes in to say...
Because didn't he go to the Crown to get the...
Basically,
Kentucky?
Yeah, we're about to get there. He greased every palm. All of them except for one, which probably is why one of the reasons he failed. And
That's annoying.
We'll get into that. So the Shawnee were mad, okay? The Shawnee probably had more say in this area than any other Indian tribe. They were the ones that kind of ruled the area. Remember when Captain Emery, he was there and he kidnapped, or he got Boone and, what was it, John Stewart?
Let him go. Then they went back to get their horses and stuff back.
Yeah. So here you have Boone doing his thing nowadays. And so anyway, the Shawnee were mad because it's their place. And the Cherokee were the ones they supposedly bought it from, right? So you have this, people are pissed off.
The Cherokees don't even really live there.
And anyway, so there's all this stuff, plus the Crown said you can't do this. The colonial government said you can't do this. And there's all these people saying, yeah, he bought it, so by law, I think he does have a case. And you have people saying, dude, it's such a fraud. He can't buy that. And regardless, he's making a go at it, right? And it says that as they were creating the laws, they started to create, people in charge of different things, right? And it says, however formally the convention began, things turned rougher as the discussion continued. As soon as Robert McAfee was appointed sergeant at arms, Richard Calloway, who always seemed to have a chip on his shoulder, demanded that John Gass be brought before the convention to answer for an insult offered Colonel Richard. So as soon as they put someone in charge, Richard Calloway said, hey, now that we have a police or, a sergeant at arms or a sheriff in town, I got a beef with this guy and I want him to apologize right now. Okay.
That's what the law is about, making people apologize.
John Gass was duly hauled in at that point, because that's how the process works. You have a complaint, you bring it before the law, blah, blah, blah. And he was reprimanded. In almost every detail in the history of Boonesborough, Richard Calloway comes off as ill-tempered, defensive, jealous, and eager to accuse and punish. At the same time, he was recognized as brave and dependable. He seemed to have always had a grudge against Boone. In modern times, Calloway would probably have been diagnosed as paranoid. But there was no way to get rid of him, and Boone's daughter Jemima carried Calloway's nephew, Flanders Calloway.
So he's family.
I hate this guy.
Yeah?
I hate this guy. He's the sort of guy that just rankles me. I want him dead. I want him to die and die a somewhat miserable death.
I don't know about the second one, but I can assure you, Brian, the first part, you got your wish.
He just is such a piece of crap. He is brave. He does put himself out there and he does fight and do all that kind of stuff.
But he can still be a turd and a war
And he
hero.
also is a jealous, conniving, weak-minded, petty, small man. Anyway, we'll get into that as time goes by. But it says the minutes of the convention show that Boone proposed a bill for preserving the game, and a committee was appointed for that purpose, and also a bill for improving the breed of horses. Most historians have noted Boone's practicality and prescience. He already saw that the very game that had drawn him into Kentucky 6 years before might soon be gone, and his second motion suggests that he already understood the importance of breeding fine horse flesh for the future of Kentucky. So it goes on to say that Henderson buys off everyone that he needs, pretty much. Remember John Floyd?
I remember the name Floyd.
So John Floyd
Dumb
was
and Dumber.
yes, he was the up-and-coming young man working in the employ of, for example, George Washington and others.
He was one of the scouts for
He was one of the surveyors, out there. He was in that party that split up, that had three groups. And he was the guy in charge of that whole surveying party that Boone came in to rescue.
Yep.
So he's a on top of it, dude. He gets brought in the inner circle with Richard Henderson to be part of Boonesborough. Anyone that might cause a problem for him, he pays off or promises things to him. So then everybody is going to go along with it because, hey, you know what? Everyone gets a piece. But there was one official Henderson had not included in his enterprise. Patrick Henry. Do you know who Patrick Henry is? Google Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry had intimated to Henderson the year before that he would like to be part of the Louisa Company, which is now the Transylvania Company. Thomas Jefferson had also hinted he wanted to be included in the Transylvania venture. You do know who Thomas Jefferson is, right?
Shut up, yes.
We'll just leave that one there. But Richard Henderson had not invited either of them. Not Patrick Henry and not Thomas Jefferson. Okay? You following?
Yeah, I'm following, but I'm also reading about Patrick Henry. He's a founding father.
Yes.
The man who said, give me liberty or give me death?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Henry. Henry's got some cojones on him.
It's a person you ought to know. So Patrick Henry becomes, he's not invited into the inner circle, and neither is Thomas Jefferson. And you can tell from U.S. history that these are two important people that got snubbed, that got pushed out. Two people that perhaps, that especially Patrick Henry, had wanted in on the Transylvania Company or the Louisa Company prior to that. But Richard Henderson had not invited either of them, fearing they would dominate his company. He wanted to be the all-star, But it goes to show the circles he's running in, Richard Henderson. You know what I mean? Like his peers, the people he feels are rivals of his, and had history maybe done things slightly different, we might think of Richard Henry or Richard Henderson in a totally different light. But
It's
nevertheless,
important to pick out your friends correctly, folks.
he left them out for fear that they would, take over or be too bossy, or he couldn't have all
Go
the
steal
power.
his shine.
So it says, of all his mistakes, this may have been the most serious, referring to Richard Henderson. Smarting from the snub, Henry Patrick and his associates became powerful enemies of the Transylvania Company. Yet even Henry had originally conceded that the Transylvania purchase might be valid. As Neil O'Hammond tells us, quote, William Christian told Floyd that his brother-in-law, Patrick Henry, believed the purchase to be legal and based on existing English law.
It kind of was. Just
And
the wrong
remember,
kind of
Richard
Indian.
Henderson was a judge. Like he is in the upper courts between both the British Empire and in colonial courts on behalf of the British Empire. He knows the law. He's kind of, but at this point, yeah, he was ready to go along with it. And Patrick Henry, in fact, had wanted some piece of the company as well as Thomas Jefferson. Had he done that partnership, had he allowed them in, who knows? Who knows how things might have turned out? But instead, he created two enemies. And later, they're like, the attitude toward that Transylvania purchase changes. It says, after the memorable convention under the Divine Elm, nothing seemed to go right for Henderson and the Transylvania Company. Mm-hmm. Now, for those that are listening, I am skipping huge parts of this book. I'm just jumping through, and I recommend, if you want to know more in between, get the book and get go through it, because there's lots of interesting things going on that I'm just jumping over. But it says that it didn't go right. And it says he lived better than the rest because he was rich and had brought more supplies, and his servant Dan milked the cows, caught catfish from the river, and raised a garden. Richard Henderson is doing all right. Luckily, the catfish in the Kentucky River were plentiful and large. The English traveler Nicholas Creswell noted in his diary on May 30th, in our absence, those at the camp caught a large catfish, which measured 6 inches between the eyes. We supposed it would weigh about 40 pounds. Filson would later report that in Kentucky, Filson was the first biography of Daniel Boone. Mm-hmm. He was like a school teacher. Filson, so he wrote that in Kentucky, there were catfish that weighed more than 100 pounds. But the business of running Boonesborough... I see you doing a fact check here. It says, but the business of running Boonesborough seemed to overwhelm Henderson. He could not force the men to finish building the stockade. He could not force them to stay in Kentucky. In fact, he found he could not force them to do much of anything.
Surprise. I don't know, man. If I got some guy yelling at me and he's wearing a wig, that's kind of...
Dude, you don't know. Have you seen a picture of him? Is he wearing a wig? Is there a painting of Henderson?
The problem with the painting, Brian. They all have wigs in the paintings, whether they wore them in real life or not.
It says, so going back to the book, things start to get dicey. It doesn't look good. Some people are saying this is bull. It says many already in Kentucky, including some who had come with him, doubted.
106 is the state record.
So they do have 100-pound catfish.
They do. The biggest catfish is 106.9 pounds they've ever caught.
Dang.
Caught by Glenn Grogan. Shout out, Glenn.
What year?
It doesn't say what year it is.
It says many already in Kentucky, including some who had come with him, doubted the validity of Henderson's claim. So that, again, people are starting to say, hey, dude, he bought it? Really? From the Cherokee? Really? Mm-hmm. And so it says he would not be able to protect them against the Indians as well, because that's kind of what he said. Don't worry, come join my community in Boonesborough, and you'll have protection from the Indians. Don't worry, settlers. I got you. Come here, and we will cover you. And it says Nicholas Creswell recorded in his diary the skepticism settlers in the region expressed about Henderson's colony. And remember, Creswell is just a British traveler, kind of documenting things. Sort of a traveling journalist, I suppose.
Cute.
Sunday, June 11th, 1775. This is a journal entry by Creswell. Found Captain Hancock Lee camped at Elkhorn, surveying the land. This is a new settlement by some Carolina gentleman who pretends to have purchased the land from the Indians, but with what truth I cannot pretend to say, as the Indians affirm they never sold these lands. We're some Carolina gentleman who pretends to have purchased the land from the Indians.
From what I recall, there was a large powwow and basically a flea market all the way down the side of the river full of stuff that he gave them.
Yep. So Daniel Boone left Boonesborough on June 13 to return to the Clinch River for his family, accompanied by several young settlers. And so he goes back because his wife is there. Mm-hmm. That summer, while Rebecca waited for the birth of their 9th child, Boone traveled around the region persuading others to join the venture and to come out onto the Kentucky River. In this, he was successful, as he always seemed to be at gathering a party to follow him. Rebecca was now in her late 30s. It's an advanced age for childbearing in those days. It was a troubled pregnancy and difficult birth. After the baby, named William, was born in late July and died soon afterward, she was exhausted, in no condition to journey over the mountains. So they stay, they recruit, they keep building people to go. they
Does
wouldn't.
Rebecca stay behind?
Boone kept telling people, just go, because he's not leaving his wife, just go. But they would not budge without him. Hell no,
Yeah.
we ain't going without you, Boone.
Yeah, for real.
The man has a horseshoe up his ass. Like he doesn't get killed. So they're like, no, we're not going without you.
But here's the thing. Those guys with horseshoes up their ass, they survive. But if you notice, everyone around them tends to not quite make it.
It says, and since Boone would not return without his wife and family, things were at a standstill. So it says, the history of the frontier was, as written, has been mostly the story of men who went there. But recently, scholars have been more willing to consider the role of women and the conditions the women struggled with in settling the frontier. Kentucky had been described by Boone and others as a good poor man's country. But as Stephen Aaron says, Rebecca Boone and her pioneer sisters understood that a good poor man's country was not the same as a good poor woman's country. Indeed, the former was often antithetical to the latter. Others would point out that the prime bluegrass section of Kentucky would prove inhospitable even to poor men. From all the testimony we have, Rebecca Bryan Boone must have been one of the hardiest and most resilient and resourceful women in American history. But after the death of the 9th child, even she was in need of rest. In a world with only the most rudimentary medicines and medical knowledge, the risk of infection after childbirth was very great. Many women died of childbed fever. Whether Rebecca had fever or not, it took her about 6 weeks to regain her strength, enough to make the move to Kentucky. Dude, she pushed a child out. Like, it takes some time, man. It says, sometimes the women were as eager to move into the wilderness as the men. The reasons were essentially different, though. Men were drawn into the new territories by visions of paradise and promise of great wealth. Women by a desire for a new home and a fertile, sustaining garden. Whatever their reasons, explicit or implicit, women began to pour into the wilderness by the hundreds and then by the thousands. On July 18, Henderson had written in his diary, "Our salt is low, and the men and the colonel and the men who went with Colonel Boone have not come back. We are informed that Miss Boone had a problem, blah, 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 and we don't know when to look for him and when they will come, and until he comes, the devil himself can't get the others to come."
Yeah.
So it says on August 10, Henderson packed up and left Boonesborough for North Carolina. And it says he wouldn't come back for like another year and a half. It is said that in his final weeks there, without Boone to persuade the men to cooperate, Henderson spent much of his time in his cabin with a bottle of whiskey.
And his books.
So it says that he would feel better at home lobbying legislators, and he would not return to Kentucky until the end of the year. So it was the end of the year, not a year later, the end of the year. It says that when Boone arrived, so finally they get better, and we're jumping ahead, and Boone comes with his family finally, and they arrive, and it says Henderson had been gone almost a month by the time Boone gets there, so Henderson had already left. Whatever the conditions of the place, and there is evidence the station was something of a shambles, Boone set to work building a substantial cabin adjoining the fort to be with real glass windows and wooden floor.
How are they getting glass?
I like how you bring out your phone again and you start looking.
How are they making it?
They carried it.
Bull.
They carried
Bull.
it, bro. They carried it. They certainly didn't make it. The care with which he built and the fact that he had brought his family show that he came for the long haul.
With glass.
The records of the company's store attest that he charged many items, including 100 yards of linen cloth for his wife and daughters. It was time to begin preparing for the winter, and Boone made the cabin weatherproof. Before he had left for the Clinch in June, he had planted a field of corn and hoed and plowed it before laying it by. That is, leaving it to grow on its own after the stalks were about knee-high. So he got it going, about knee-high, then he ditched it. A first crop of corn on deadened acres grew explosively in soil black as gunpowder, usually planted in hills, not rows, because of all the roots and stumps and standing deadened tree trunks. A good crop of corn was essential to the settlers. At Boonesborough, as now, corn could be turned into fine whiskey by those with a knack for distilling. Corn would become the basic ingredient of Kentucky's most popular product, bourbon. Arthur K. Moore has written, after clearing the best land for a time yielded corn bountifully without exceptional care, from 40 bushels the first year to more than 100 the third. In 1784, Filson would write that more than 100 bushels of corn could be grown on an acre each year. It says, quote, "My wife and daughter being the first white women that ever stood on the banks of Kentucky River," Boone said later. Certainly there would soon be white women at the other settlements, such as Harrods and blah, blah, blah. It is unlikely that Boone knew of Mary Ingalls, kidnapped from her home at Draper's Meadow in 1755. She was able to escape later from Bighorn Lick in Kentucky and make her way back to Draper's Meadows in 41 days.
Who kidnapped her? Did they kind of left that part out?
Indians.
Did it say that? Just said she was kidnapped.
You can look her up. Why don't you do that? Mary Ingalls, 1755.
1755.
It says, 41 days. The daughters of Boone, who first lived in Kentucky, was Susanna Boone Hayes, who had come with choppers at Boone's Trace.
Hey, Mary's got her own statue. It's a terrible statue. I don't know what she's like, looks like she's being blown in the wind. Like, I'm throwing a picture up, folks.
That's a nice statue. It does look like she's seeing aliens coming down in a bright light and then or something. It says, among the folklore, it says this: the daughter of Boone, who first lived in Kentucky, the first daughter he had in Kentucky was Susanna Boone Hayes, who had come with the choppers at Boone's Trace. Among the folklore of her liveliness and naughtiness is a quote passed on to Reverend John Dabney Shane by Nathaniel Hart Jr. Quote, "Every Kentuckian ought to try my gait," she is reported to have said, "since I was the first white woman in Kentucky."
I don't know what that means.
Her gate is, swings open and closed.
I was wondering if that was supposed to be a euphemism or not.
Yeah. Every Kentuckian ought to try my gate, since I was the first white woman in Kentucky.
I'm good. Thanks, bro. I'll wait for the next one.
Boone, you've got a wild one there.
There's a movie based on this gal, Ingalls, Mary Ingalls, called The Captives, back in like 2004.
Was it 2004? The Captives, wasn't that a John Wayne movie?
The Captives is an American film starring Elliot Miller. No, it's produced by Judd Miller.
I think that's the remake.
Oh, really?
I think that's a remake of the John Wayne version.
Probably. I don't see anything about John Wayne being mentioned in here. She was snatched by some Shawnees, and they're not really giving me a whole lot of details about the whole thing.
Searchers. That's the John Wayne movie. It was based in part of the story of the abduction 9-year-old girl in East Texas. No, this is much later. Much later than that. This is 100 years. The Searchers is 100 years later. Not quite 100. Yeah, about 100. It's later. When did she get... Well, 1755.
Yeah.
25 years before this date.
I'm not getting a whole lot of info about her, but there's multiple
movies,
monuments to this lady. Like when they tore down her house, they took all the bricks and they made this big pillar next to Boone something or other.
She escaped and made it back after 40. What was it? How many days?
41 days. She has a highway named after her.
She was kidnapped from her home at Draper's Meadows in 1755. She was able to escape later from Big Bone Lick in Kentucky and make her way back to Draper's Meadows in 41 days. How'd she escape? I want the story,
How
bro.
How did she survive?
I want the story. Yeah, she was out there for a month and...
Mary Draper Ingalls, known for escape from Indian captivity. Thanks, Google. Thanks. That just felt like a big middle finger.
Your little search isn't doing us much good today. You're hitting a dead end here.
Apparently.
Maybe try DuckDuckGo. Maybe there's
there. Google's too commie.
Who knows? Anyway, all right. That's it for today, Brent. That gets you kind of up to speed. Now Boone is there. His whole family is there. They are now. You can surmise the foreshadowing here of the fact that the fort isn't getting built.
Because the Boones are out there booning all around and not working.
The Indians are, out there and where this is headed.
Nowhere good. You told me someone's going to get jacked up because they failed somehow. I'm curious, what was the downfall?
What's interesting is this is how a settlement begins, though, right? Mm-hmm. Like, a bunch of people move out there, and they just start setting up shop, and they're hoping that 100 Indians don't descend on them and kill them all in one go. But things are going to get dicey here pretty soon. Kids are going to get kidnapped. Check this out. Here's some pictures of. There's your tree. Look at that thing.
That is a gigantic tree.
Divine elm, Brent. The divine elm.
The divine elm.
And then look at Boonesborough in 1778, that drawing. That's when they finally did get built.
That?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, those are the two buildings that it was talking about.
Yeah, those are the stockade buildings
on the corners and stuff. So I was trying to imagine that.
You got buildings on each corner to sort of hold up the walls in between, and those buildings are super tall.
Dang, you want to see the divine elm now?
There's a lot of that going on, isn't there?
Yeah.
Somebody cut it down. They're like, I think in the book it might say they cut it down. Like, at some point they just like, oh, that'll make some great wood. That's a lot of wood.
That's a lot of wood there. Yeah.
It's
just a little marker.
Story of European settlement of the Americas. Chop it down. But it's also the story of mankind, period. Generally. Interesting, huh? So that's it for today. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. We appreciate you listening to the show. Hope you're enjoying it. Like and subscribe to the channel if you want to support us. Leave a comment below. Check out our partners. We thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Hello, friends. I hope you're enjoying our new Dueling Pistols podcast. Remember, it's only here temporarily on the Gritty channel.
Short time.
If you want to subscribe to the main show, head on over to our YouTube channel, Dueling Pistols, and subscribe over there. And anywhere that you get your podcast, you can subscribe there. Thanks for supporting us.
We're on all platforms.
Yeah, we're out there. Find it over there. And tell a friend.
Yeah.
Tell a friend about our new show.
Tell all your friends.
Help us grow it bigger.
We're just going to turn this to an ASMR.
All right. Thanks, guys. Catch you on the next episode.